Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Amma ba'du fa'auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear brothers and sisters. Jazakallah to the moderators and the MSLM team for setting up and organizing this conference and giving me the chance to come and also speak about this topic, which, as mentioned, is Signs and Atoms, Bridging Revelation and Molecular Science. And I'm going to start off with a story, so I'll take you back 200 years. This English chemist, Michael Faraday, he's also an English physicist. He was studying a liquid, and this liquid was obtained from compression of oil gas. And it was very strange. And as he was trying to study it, he deduced that this liquid had a roughly 2-to-1 ratio of carbon to hydrogen. And he gave it this name. He called it bicarbonate of hydrogen. At the time, it was actually believed in the scientific community that carbon had a molecular weight of only 6 grams per mole. But later, it was found out that it didn't have a molecular weight of 6, it was twice that. It had a molecular weight of 12 grams per mole. So the calculation was later revised, and it was found out that this had a 1-to-1 ratio of carbon to hydrogen. And this puzzled the scientific community, because they couldn't figure out exactly what kind of structure this liquid had. It burned with a smoky flame. It was highly unsaturated, meaning that it wasn't saturated with hydrogens. It was only 1-to-1 ratio of hydrogen to carbon. But it was surprisingly stable. They would subject it to different reactions and different reaction conditions, but it wouldn't react. It remained relatively stable. So it was really interesting, and this kind of touched the interest of a German chemist, August Kekulé. And August Kekulé has done a significant amount of work with organic chemistry, and he was really interested in trying to figure out the structure of organic molecules. And he had, and pretty much you can see some of the structures that are here, these line bond structures that are typically kind of viewed when looking at organic molecules. A lot of that is attributed to the work from August Kekulé. And this is really interesting. Something that was actually understood at that time was that a carbon atom can have up to 4 bonds to it. And I want to move to this verse from the Holy Quran, so I'm going to skip this slide. I'll get right back to that. From Surah Al-Fatir. I'll read the translation. In the name of Allah, the Gracious, the Merciful. All praise belongs to Allah, the Maker of the heavens and the earth, who employs the angels as messengers, having wings 2, 3, and 4. He adds to His creation whatever He pleases, for Allah has power over all things. And it's really interesting, Surah Al-Fatir. Al-Fatir means the originator. And Hazrat Khalifatul Masih IV, Rahmatullah alayh, actually inferred that this could be interpreted as indicating the different valencies of the atoms, the elements that were there. And valencies mean how many bonds that can have. So something like oxygen can have up to 2 bonds, and that would keep it stable. If it has more, it would have a charge on it. Nitrogen can have 3 bonds, and carbon would have 4. And so this could indicate the different valencies of these atoms. Carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen are the foundation of organic chemistry, and they are the building block of life. Without carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen, you wouldn't have amino acids, you wouldn't have proteins, you wouldn't have DNA. So it's really interesting to kind of see this. And this scientist, August Kekulé, he understood that carbon can have these 4 bonds. And at the time, there was a lot of understanding that chemical bonds, they would always have these line structures. And if you kind of can visualize, if you want to go back to your sophomore organic chemistry, those squiggly lines, those zigzags, that was your hydrocarbon chain. And kind of visualize it like a snake, that a snake is kind of slithering through. This was the viewpoint, this was the understanding of how these bonds were forming. And he was looking at this bicarbonate of hydrogen, this 1-to-1 ratio, and trying to figure out what is that exact structure of this chemical compound. And it actually goes back to a vision that he had, a dream. And he says that, "I was sitting writing at my textbook, but the work did not progress. My thoughts were elsewhere. I turned my chair to the fire and dozed. Again, the atoms were gamboling before my eyes. This time the smaller groups kept modestly in the background. My mental eye, rendered more acute by repeated visions of this kind, could now distinguish larger structures of manifold conformation, long rows, sometimes more closely fitted together, all twining and twisting in snake-like motion. These are those long carbon chains, those molecules. But look, what was that? One of the snakes had seized hold of its own tail, and the form whirled mockingly before my eyes. As if by a flashing of lightning, I awoke, and this time also I spent the rest of the night in working out the consequences of the hypothesis." That snake, going in a circular motion, eating its own tail, was the inspiration for him putting forth the structure that benzene, this 1-to-1 ratio of carbon to hydrogen, was benzene. And that's the structure that's shown here. And this is such an important structure because it really is the base of a lot of the developments that happened over the last 100 years. What's I found intriguing is that this structure was put forward around 1870, 1880, right around the time of the advent of the Imam Society al Islam. And in those, since then, we see that this benzene ring is found in so many different compounds and molecules that have been developed over the past 100 years. Not only medicines, but food dyes, food additives, those vibrant colors in your shirts, your different perfumes, these all come from these aromatic compounds, these benzene derivatives. And they've grown and become much more complex. Here I'm just showing just a list of some of the drugs that have been approved by the FDA in 2024. And as you can see, they all have these different benzene-like structures present in there. And pretty much essentially any majority of all APIs or active pharmaceutical ingredients have these benzene rings. So it's a really integral part, and very, looking back at that revelation, that inspiration that he had really drove for that development. But I want to touch on to that sort of the last part of that verse, that he adds to the creation whatever he pleases, for Allah has power over all things. And this kind of hints to the future. We see in the pharmaceutical industry, there's kind of an merging of biology and chemistry. Here I have an example of antibody-drug conjugates, where you develop a small molecule, a compound that will then bind to an antibody, and that will be administered to help treat cancer. And it's working very effectively, and it's a really big, part of the industry. Also, synthetically creating different oligonucleotides to conduct chemistry and reactions with RNA. So this, having that merger and that development, that growth. But here I just wanted to highlight this point, is that the complexity of drugs and these active pharmaceutical ingredients that are being developed by the pharmaceutical industry are getting much more complex. Here, we see Lipitor, for example, in 1996. You can see that structure. It's very, from an organic chemistry perspective, it's not very complex. You have some different sites of chirality, but generally you can see these benzene rings. But if we look right now, here I have an example of orforglipperon. This is being developed by Eli Lilly, their GLP-1 receptor agonist is going to be an oral drug that they're developing right now. It's in phase 3. But here you can see just the level of complexity. And this is normal right now in the industry, that the molecules are developing, they're getting more. It's as if Allah Ta'ala is creating, we're learning more, we're developing more, and we're building molecules much more complex. And so, this just kind of wanted to point out that this revelation, that one simple revelation that happened was really something that inspired scientists to better understand how the chemical bonds formed and put together and better understand what that structure was. And that kind of helped to spawn a lot of the development of medicines over the past 100 years. So we can, as a synthetic organic chemist, that we can utilize a lot of that knowledge and understanding. And it's really inspiring and exciting to kind of think, from that verse that Allah Ta'ala adds to it. And so inshallah there will be even more, complexity, but also more better understanding so that we can grow and develop and build and more medicines, inshallah. So Jazakallah to the MSLM team and for the audience for listening. Jazakallah.